Dr. Dre makes new music for GTA. PlayStation PC is a real thing. Sony's next PlayStation game coming to PC revealed. And new gameplay details for Little Devil Inside. All on this episode of the Bleep Bloop podcast. What's going on, folks? It is your guy Retro Lag. Welcome to another episode of the Bleep Bloop podcast. If this is your first time coming to the podcast, I want to say thank you. Thank you. This is something that is really a whole new direction from what I was doing before, but I love it. The first episode, we were talking about the state of play and just some official kind of announcement stuff. This episode, we are talking about gaming headlines that came out this week. Now, we're not going to talk about all of them because there's always tons of stories, but I want to talk about the ones that I think were the most relevant to what my interests are, and to kind of talk about some of the stuff that I think maybe you might have seen, might have piqued your interest. So the first story that we are bringing is Dr. Dre is making new music for GTA. But the question on everybody's mind is which one? Is it going to be for the definitive edition, Grand Theft Auto, the trilogy, where San Andreas is the one that people might be thinking? Could it be GTA 5 Online? He also made a cameo in one of the DLCs, but there is also talk that Rockstar is already working on GTA 6, so could he be contributing to that? Really, there's no definitive word until it gets closer, but rest assured, whatever he drops is going to be great. I mean, Dr. Dre is one of those producers he's just legendary, especially when it comes to hip hop. But more importantly than that, he's a producer. He's a producer's producer. So when you think of him, you got to think of other producers like the RZA, who also scored The Man with the Golden Fist, or The Man with the Iron Fist, if I'm not mistaken. Also starred in that movie. So, there's producers that have actually scored movies in the past. So Dr. Dre would be no different. And I think when you come to games, especially games that are kind of revolving around a similar environment like the Los Angeles area, it would only make sense to have one of the West Coast legendary producers involved in some way, shape, or form. What do you guys think? Do you think that it's going to be for the new game? Do you think that it's going to be for the definitive edition? What are your thoughts? I'm interested, so we'll see what happens. All right, as we shift gears to the next story, earlier this week, it was announced that PlayStation PC could be a new division focused on PC releases. This article comes from GameSpot, and Eddie Mackich writes that VGC discovered that Sony Interactive Entertainment apparently registered the, quote, PlayStation PC, unquote, name in April 2021. However, Sony has not yet commented publicly about a new division called PlayStation PC. Now, looking ahead, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, and Uncharted The Lost Legacy are coming to PC in 2022. Eddie goes on to also say that while God of War is also coming to PC next year, there's also Sackboy: A Big Adventure is in the works potentially, and Sony also acquired PC port specialist Studio Nix's, fueling further speculation about Sony's plans for PC. Now, it only makes sense that PC or Sony would do this because if you think about some of their IPs that they've had in the past, exclusive titles, God of War, Uncharted, even Little Big Planet, I mean, there's so much, like Spider-Man, there's so much leg room to branch out into the PC world where you're graphically these games can really show what they're made of. In addition to that, it broadens the spectrum of PlayStation that isn't already massive, as if it wasn't already massive. And I just think this is the right move. I mean, it only makes sense if you look at Xbox and Xbox Game Pass. I mean, they're right there front and center. And I think PlayStation doing this, it only makes sense because if you don't, it could be argued that Microsoft could essentially corner the market, and then PlayStation is left only relying on console. And then does it get to a point with cloud gaming where games come out day one release on Xbox and they're graphically amazing because they're being able to be played on PC while PlayStation is limited to the console at that time, what it can graphically do. So this only makes sense for them, expanding their market. I'm definitely interested to see what some of the titles are going to do, especially when you look at exclusives. You got, Spider-Man 2 getting ready to come out in the next year or two. So if they have this division open by then, could that be a day one release on PlayStation as well as PC, or does it come shortly thereafter? God of War, that comes out, and then a year later, Ragnarok comes out, and then is there a bundle? So these are just all things that would make sense. Red Dead Redemption Online, these are all directions that just make sense for PlayStation, and I'm really, for one, happy to see this because over the years, I have to say, a lot of what I was playing on console, I'm actually playing on PC now, with the exception of the PlayStation exclusives. So this is a story that I was definitely happy to see and happy to read and hear about. And I'm even more so interested to see, next year E3, PlayStation PC division is up and running. What are they bringing to the table? And are there, PlayStation exclusives that are kind of like Epic, you can only get that game from the PlayStation Store, but you can play it on PC. So that's kind of the direction where the gaming wars go. The console wars before were based on consoles, but now with Xbox being on Windows, now PlayStation has to get in that same market. So that kind of battle, that friendly challenge competition keeps going. So this is a great story. I'm glad that I was able to bring this one to you, and I'm looking forward to see what happens in the future. Speaking of Sony, it was revealed possibly that the next PlayStation game coming to PC may have been revealed, and it looks like the Sumo Digital 2020 Little Big Planet game Sackboy is headed to PC. Again, this is another story from GameSpot by Eddie Makic, and he goes on to say that SteamDB has been updated with the new title with the codename Steel PC, and the listing also mentions something called Marmalade. This is believed to be a reference to Sumo Digital's Sackboy, a big adventure, according to VGC. Now, here's what you got to think. The Sackboy Big Adventure game was a PlayStation 5 game, right? Like, if I'm not mistaken, it was one of the launch titles. So this already being preemptively set to be released as a PlayStation PC game lends itself to the notion that titles that you see that are for PlayStation 5 could potentially be gearing to come out on PC sooner than these older games. Now, I think when you go back to the other article we just talked about, the port studio that Sony acquired, perhaps they're going to be focusing on the older titles, while these newer titles have already had this plan going forward. So could this have already been in motion and the wheels are turning to make these official, these news releases and these announcements? There is no real official date. All it really says is that it's unconfirmed officially. Sony has definitely announced God of War and Uncharted, which are headed to PC in 2022. So there's really no date for this game, and even if it is the game that's coming, but I would venture to say that if these other games are already headed in that direction, maybe they are trying to look at some of the probably the easier titles to port, and then the bigger ones, maybe because of the studios that own them, it's going to take a little bit more time. So it just looks really interesting what's happening in the Sony PlayStation landscape in terms of PC. Switching gears. Now, this story comes from IGN. Ubisoft plans to create its own blockchain games to enable more play to earn. This is from Rebecca Valentine. The article starts out, Ubisoft just concluded its Q2 earnings call, a strange event where relatively okay financial numbers were overshadowed by the company being on the defensive due to delays. But one element that seemed to make both Ubisoft and investors happy was the discussion of blockchain. Ubisoft's future blockchain ambitions were mentioned both in earnings release and a few times during the call. She goes on to say Ubisoft is funding blockchain gaming company Animoca Brands. Animoca's current projects include Rev Motorsport, Rev Racing, and upcoming game Formula E High Voltage. It goes on to say all of which use this same token called Rev to enable players to own digital assets and collect NFT in-game items. It also has a game called The Sandbox, a virtual world full of NFTs called Sand. Now, I got to tell you this. I am slowly starting to try and immerse myself in understanding this blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFT world, because I think that this is something that people need to jump on sooner than later, because it seems like the direction that just a lot of market is going, and some gaming is going, content creation space is going. So you really have to immerse yourself in the understanding of what it is and how to involve yourself. But I think it's interesting that Ubisoft is doing this, because it makes you wonder why they're doing it. As we go further into the article, Rebecca goes on to say, when she talked to CEO Yves Guillemot, and I apologize if I said it wrong, blockchain will enable more play to earn, that will enable more players to actually earn content, own content, and we think it's going to grow the industry quite a lot, Duguay said. We've been working with lots of small companies going on blockchain, and we're starting to have a good know-how on how it can impact the industry, and we want to be one of the key players here. So this is exactly what I'm saying. Ubisoft, who's being a major publisher for games, has always been at the forefront, is already trying to jump and establish a foothold in an area that is, while it's still very fresh and very green, makes it a major player and really allows it the leverage to kind of, in a for lack of better words, probably tailor the market to benefit itself. Because if they're one of the leaders at the forefront and they potentially become one of the biggest, it's kind of like, Apple and Samsung. One kind of dictates the direction of the industry while another tries to reinvent and play catch up at the same time. So it's just going to be very interesting what publishers do in the blockchain NFT space as we go forward, and in terms of games. When you think of everything from DLCs to collector gear, memorabilia, when you think about it like an NFT, like think of the next Assassin's Creed, you get an NFT that exclusively is to you, or maybe there's a limited number, and then that NFT, the creator has the ability to change it for you, and it just is always evolving as the game and the legacy of the game evolves. And then eventually maybe there's a life cycle, but that would just be so dope, because that could be something that you have that nobody else has, so it's going to be very interesting. And I really am doing a disservice because I don't understand half of this, but I thought it was an interesting article that I wanted to share. And finally, we got the last story. New gameplay details for Little Devil Inside revealed. This was a story from Matt Kim from IGN, but I don't even really need to talk about the article. I might use it as a reference to kind of give the description of the game. But if you didn't watch the state of play that Sony did earlier this week, you really need to, because it was dope. It was dope. They showed 9 games, And out of the 3 games, or out of the 9 games, there were 3 that I really latched onto. Star Ocean: The Divine Force is one. Five Nights at Freddy's: Security Breach is another. And then this one, Little Devil Inside, is the final one that really just hooked me in. Initially when it started, I was like, okay, is this going to be like, a very touchy-feely kind of game? And there's nothing wrong with those games. It's just that those aren't really my genres of games that I like to play. However, when I started to watch the environments and the way the gameplay was structured, and then the storyline, and then the combat, the character, and then the environments again, the music, it just all started to show me that this is a game that I don't think people are really understanding what it is until they see it. And when they see it, they're going to be like, this is a great game. This is an amazing game. Little Devil Inside, just to give you a little bit of description from the article, is a unique looking title set in a kind of fantasy world with dragons and other mythical creatures. The story follows Billy, a young hero for hire, handling side jobs in the idyllic countryside. Only after a job goes wrong, Billy's whole life turns upside down. Like I said, this game is just amazing. Like, you got to watch the trailer and really see what I'm talking about. And it just looks cool how they designed this, how they developed it. And I would venture to say that what we've seen so far is only the beginning. I think there's going to be more stuff that just makes this really stand out. And for all my indie fans out there, you really need to get on this game. I mean, it's from the NeoStream Studio, so it's an action adventure game. Doesn't say when it's coming out. It is coming out on PlayStation 5, but I would venture to say that somewhere down the line, this is probably going to be one of those PC titles. So stay tuned here on Bleep Bloop as we find out more information about this game. And as we do, I will definitely bring it to you, because this one is at the top of my list, the top of the radar. Okay, folks, that is the stories for this week that I wanted to bring to you. I mean, there's tons more stories. We're not going to cover those just yet. Stay tuned to the podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, share it with your friends. Also, check out the blog site and the newsletter. Subscribe to those. Links are in the description wherever you're listening to this at. And I will catch you on the next podcast. All right? Peace.